The heat inside Judge Warfield's office clung to Mara Redbird's skin like a punishment. She stood there, spine straight, boots planted, but her breath kept shaking in her chest, no matter how tightly she held herself together. She had come to Wind River Town for answers, for a chance to set her father's affairs right. She hadn't expected to walk straight into a trap. Across from her, Silas Blackstone watched with the settled calm of a man who already believed he owned the outcome. "Mara," he said, his voice smooth as winter ice. "Your father's debt is substantial. The land cannot cover it. And you understand what that means." She tasted dust in her mouth. "My father wouldn't have left me with something he didn't intend to pay." Judge Warfield cleared his throat, his face shiny with sweat. "Intentions don't change the numbers." Blackstone tapped a stack of papers with one gloved finger. Tap, tap. The rhythm crawled beneath her skin. "Your father borrowed heavily for stock improvements. He died before repayment. Now the debt falls to you. That land is all I have." Her voice cracked despite her effort to stay composed. "And he promised far more than he could deliver." Blackstone leaned back as if he were doing her a kindness. "As it stands, the ranch will default. Unless—" His pale eyes slid over her like a cold knife. "You accept my proposal." Her stomach twisted. "You mean marriage?" "I mean salvation. For you, and for what remains of the Redbird name." A chill slid down her spine. Her father had been Eastern Shoshone. In this valley, men like Blackstone had long memories of who belonged and who did not. This was not salvation. This was acquisition. "I won't be bought," she whispered. Blackstone's smile thinned. "I'm not buying you. I'm offering protection." From whom she snapped. "You—" The judge shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Mara, be reasonable. I am." Her knees trembled, but she didn't back down. "My father taught me to stand upright. I'm standing." Blackstone's jaw twitched. "Without this agreement, you will lose everything." The office felt smaller by the second. Mara's breath came fast, tight. She thought of the ranch, the pastures rolling under the Wyoming sun, the smell of sage and dust, her father's voice teaching her how to read the wind. That land was all she had left of him. "No," she said again, stronger this time. "I won't marry you." The judge's pen slipped from his hand. "Girl, think I have thought." She looked Blackstone straight in the eye, meeting the cold triumph that flickered there. "And the answer is no." Something dark settled over Blackstone's face. "Then we are done here." He folded the papers slowly, precisely. "But understand this. You refusing me does not stop what is already in motion." Her pulse hammered. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, rising to his feet, "that the law gives me certain advantages, and I intend to use every one of them." The judge stood too, rubbing sweat from his temples. "You'd best head home before the heat worsens." Worse, Mara felt the air tighten heavy with something she couldn't name. She backed toward the door, her fingers numb. Blackstone watched her leave with a calmness far more frightening than anger. "Good day, Miss Redbird," he said lightly. "I'll be seeing you soon." She pushed the door open before she lost her nerve. Outside, the bright sun hit her like a slap. The street blurred for a moment. Dust horses, storefronts, faces turned her direction. Wind River Town was small enough that news traveled without anyone speaking. They all knew she'd gone to meet Blackstone, and they all knew what he wanted. Mara blinked hard, forcing the burning ache from her eyes, and stepped off the porch. Her boots struck the dirt with more force than she felt. She crossed town without a single person stopping her, though plenty of eyes followed. A few men lowered their gazes with quiet sympathy. Others didn't bother hiding their curiosity. She kept walking. At the hitching post, her mare Clover lifted her head and nickered softly, sensing the unrest in her. Mara stroked her muzzle, trying to steady herself. Her hands were shaking. "He can't do this," she whispered, but the tremor in her chest said he could. Men like Silas Blackstone made their own rules. Mara mounted up and tightened her grip on the reins. Clover shifted beneath her, eager to leave town behind. She guided the mare into a gallop the moment she hit open ground. Wind tore through her hair, whipping strands loose around her face. The valley stretched wide, wild, and unforgiving before her, mountains rising in the distance, sagebrush rolling in silver waves across the hills. Her father used to say, "The land listened when a person was desperate." Today she prayed he was right. Fear clawed at her as she rode the long mile home. She tried to outrun it, but the truth never left her saddle. Blackstone had power, and she had none. If he meant to strip her of the ranch, he would not stop because she'd said no. By the time the Redbird Ranch fences came into view, her breath had gone ragged. Tomas Ortega stepped out of the barn, wiping his brow. The moment he saw her face, he froze. "Mara, what happened?" She dismounted too quickly, stumbling as her boots hit the ground. Tomas rushed to steady her. "He wants the ranch," she said, her voice breaking. "And he wants me." Tomas's expression hardened. "That man doesn't want a wife. He wants control. He said the debt is mine now, that I either marry him or lose everything." Tomas muttered a curse under his breath. "Mara, listen to me. That man's been circling like a buzzard since your father took sick. He won't stop with a polite no." She pressed the heel of her hand to her forehead, trying to stop the world from spinning. "I don't know what to do." Tomas squeezed her shoulder. "We'll figure it out. But you can't face this alone." She wanted to believe him. Needed to. The ranch smelled of dust, hay, and the faint warmth of horses, familiar scents that softened the chaos in her chest. For a moment, she let herself feel safe, but then she noticed it. Boot prints along the far fence. Fresh. Deep. Someone had been there recently. Watching. Tomas saw it too. "You expecting company?" "No." They stood in silence, heat rippling through the air. "Mara," Tomas said quietly, "this ain't over. Blackstone won't sit and wait." A shudder passed through her. She looked at the horizon, at the rolling grass, the distant hills, the sky wide enough to swallow anyone who didn't know how to stay standing. "He's coming," she whispered. "Yeah," Tomas said, "and we'd best be ready when he does." The wind picked up, carrying dust across the yard. It swept through the quiet ranch like a warning. Mara gripped the reins in her hands, staring at the fence line where the footprints led away. She didn't know how yet, but she felt it deep in her bones. The next time she saw Silas Blackstone, the stakes would be higher, and the valley would not stay quiet for long. "You can outrun a storm, Mara, but you can't outrun a man who believes he owns you." Tomas Ortega said it when the sun was sliding behind the ridge, bleeding orange light across the yard. But Mara had been hearing those words long before he spoke them out loud. They hung in her mind now as she paced the porch, arms folded tight across her chest, watching the pasture darken into shadow. Clover grazed near the corral. Chickens settled in their coop. A warm wind rustled the cottonwoods behind the barn. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. Her father had always said a quiet valley could hide the worst kind of noise. Inside, Tomas struck a match. The faint glow spilled across the windows, as he lit the lantern on the kitchen table. "Come inside," he called. "You haven't eaten. I'm not hungry." "That's not a reason," he said, stepping onto the porch. His voice softened when he saw her face. "Mara, you're trembling." She clenched her hands to stop it. "Someone was here before we got home. Those prints weren't hours old. We don't know it was Blackstone's men. You think anyone else would stalk this ranch the same day he tried to force my hand?" Tomas didn't answer. He didn't need to. The moment she'd left that courtroom, she'd felt the shift in the air, like a storm dragging itself across the plains, no lightning yet, but all the pressure building under the sky. Blackstone wasn't the kind of man who waited for consent. He took what he wanted, how he wanted, when he wanted, and now she knew, without doubt, that he wanted her land. And her. She hugged herself, rubbing her arms as if she could scrub off the memory of his stare. "I won't let him win, Tomas. You won't." He said it with the steady certainty she needed. "But we have to be smart. Men like Blackstone don't leave marks without planning something worse." A gust of wind swept across the porch. The lantern flickered behind him. Mara glanced toward the open fields. Dusk was always her father's favorite time. He said it was when the world rested its weight a little. Tonight, though, the sky felt heavy, expectant, watching. "You think he'll come tonight?" she asked. "No," Tomas said. "Not tonight. Tonight, he'll wait for you to panic." "I'm close," she whispered. He gave her a sad smile. "I know." A coyote howled somewhere beyond the far ridge. The sound skittered across her nerves. She swallowed hard and forced herself off the porch. "I should check the barn," she said. "If they walked the fence once, they might have tried the doors. I'll go with you." They crossed the yard together, boots crunching over dry grass. The air smelled of dust and horses, warm but sharp. The barn loomed dark except for a thin line of gold where Tomas had left the lantern earlier. Mara stopped before they entered. "Do you hear that?" Tomas listened. The night hummed with crickets. Clover pawed the earth. But beneath that, something else, a faint metallic clatter, like a loose latch settling. Tomas reached for the barn door, sliding it open slow. Inside, the lantern cast long shadows along the stalls. Everything seemed normal at first. Tack in place, hay bales stacked, Clover's bridle hanging where Mara left it. But the faint smell of sweat that didn't belong to any of their horses hung in the air. "Someone was in here," she said, stepping forward. "Recently." Tomas crouched near the far stall, tracing a muddy print with 2 fingers. "Boot tread. And not mine. Not yours either." Her throat tightened. "This is how it starts," she said. "He sends someone to watch, then to threaten. Eventually they'll try to break something, a gate, a fence, a window." She forced her breath steady. "And then he'll walk up to the door, pretending to be the only man who can fix it." Tomas wiped the print with a cloth, erasing its outline. "Blackstone plans like a wolf, tests every weakness before he lunges." Mara pressed her hand against the stall rail to steady herself. "What am I supposed to do? Hide until he gives up? He won't give up, I know." Her voice cracked. "I just wish my father were here." Tomas stood and placed a warm, rough hand on her shoulder. "Your father raised you tougher than any man in this valley. You don't need him to fight this. You just need a plan." She wished she believed him. They left the barn and walked back into the fading twilight. The valley had settled into full night now, stars thick over the mountains. But fear made the dark stretch deeper than usual, as if something waited inside it. A figure approached from the north fence, a shape she didn't recognize until it stepped into the lantern glow. Mara. A young boy from the neighboring farm waved hesitantly. "My pa sent me. Said to warn you." Her heart thudded. "Warn me about what?" The boy sucked in a nervous breath. "I seen Whit Prescott headin' toward your place. Just him and another fella. They were talking real quiet, but I heard enough to know it wasn't good." Prescott. Blackstone's right hand. The man who did what Blackstone didn't want to be seen doing. Mara felt the blood drain from her face. When, 'bout an hour ago, the boy glanced over his shoulder as if afraid they'd followed him. "Pa said I should come straight here." "Thank you," Mara said, touching his arm. "Go home quick. Don't look back." He ran until his small figure vanished into the dark. Tomas cursed under his breath. Prescott's the kind of man who kicks doors before he knocks. Mara stepped off the porch, scanning the dark edges of the property. Her pulse hammered like it had in the judge's office, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was from anger. Sharp. Hot. Clean. "He's not taking this ranch," she said. "No," Tomas agreed. "But we need help before this gets worse. We can't trust the sheriff. Blackstone owns him. We don't need the sheriff." Tomas glanced toward the road. "But we might need someone who knows how men like Prescott think." She frowned. "Who?" Tomas hesitated. "Someone's riding this way. Hear that hoofbeats? Slow, measured, coming up the road with the confidence of a man who didn't hide his arrival." Mara felt her breath catch. Her nerves tightened, but not with fear this time, with expectation. "Whoever that is," Tomas murmured, resting his hand on the knife at his belt. "They picked the wrong night to surprise us." The hoofbeats drew closer, echoing against the quiet valley. Mara squared her shoulders, bracing herself for whoever stepped out of the dark. She didn't know yet that the rider approaching dusty, worn and carrying storms of his own would change everything. But some part of her, deep and unspoken, felt the shift in the air. Something was coming. Someone was coming. And the valley, tense and waiting, seemed to breathe in with her. "If I meant trouble, ma'am, I wouldn't have come knockin'. Trouble doesn't knock." Mara Redbird kept her hand on the shotgun, even though the rider before her didn't look like a monk capable of lifting his own arms, much less causing harm. His horse, a mottled gray with sweat crusted on its neck, stood trembling, ribs showing clear beneath its hide. Dust coated the man from hat brim to boots. He looked carved out of road and heat and long miles. Yet the way he sat the saddle, even exhausted, told her he knew exactly how to move through danger. Tomas stood beside her, blade drawn. The night around them hummed with the restless silence that had shadowed the ranch since she returned from town. Whoever this man was, he had arrived on a night already thick with tension. Mara held the lantern higher. "State your name." The stranger cleared his throat. "Cade Holt." The sound of his voice was rough, like gravel dragged across wood, but it wasn't threatening. Just tired. Bone-tired. He swayed a little in the saddle. "My horse needs water." His eyes flicked toward the well behind her. "Just water. Then I'll be on my way." Tomas didn't move his knife. Men don't come to a ranch at night without reason. Cade's gaze sharpened for a moment. "I didn't pick the hour. Just ran out of road." Mara studied him. Despite the dust and the hunger written in the hollows of his cheeks, he held himself with a quiet steadiness. Not begging, not lying. Just a man on the edge of falling off his saddle. He didn't wear a gang mark. No gun rigged low for fast draw. no twitchy eyes looking for leverage. Still, this valley had taught her caution. "Get down slow," she said. Cade nodded and eased out of the saddle. His legs nearly buckled. Tomas stepped forward ready, but Cade caught the saddle horn and steadied himself before either of them could help. "Been a long week," he muttered. Mara moved cautiously around him, still holding the lantern, and took the gray's reins. The horse's breath came harsh and wet. It lowered its head gratefully when she led it to the trough. "You from around here?" she asked without looking up. "No." Cade removed his hat and wiped dust from his brow. The lantern cast sharp lines across his face. "Just passing through." Tomas eyed him. Plenty of men just passing through find trouble on the way. Cade glanced at him, then at Mara. "If I meant trouble, ma'am, I wouldn't have come knocking. Trouble doesn't knock." Mara felt something shift inside her. A simple line, but honest. And honesty was harder to find than water these days. She looked again at the gray horse. The poor animal drank as if the trough held salvation. "Your horse is spent," she said, "and you're not far behind." Cade shrugged. "Won't argue that." "You need food," she said, "and rest." Tomas shot her a look. "Mara." "He's alone," she said quietly, "and starving. That doesn't mean he's safe." "No one is safe tonight," she answered. Cade's eyes flicked between them, sensing the tension, but not prying. He simply said, "I don't want to cause any trouble between you two. I'll take water and ride out." Mara stepped forward. "You stay until first light. No one rides blind through this valley at night, unless they're looking to die." Something unreadable passed through Cade's expression, but he nodded once. "Thank you." Inside the house, the lantern's warm glow softened the hard edges of the night. Mara set bread and stew before him. Cade ate slowly at first, then faster once the first few bites hit his stomach. Tomas leaned against the wall, watching every movement, arms crossed. Mara took the seat across from Cade. She wasn't a trusting person by nature, not anymore, but something in the way he moved, cautious, but not afraid, settled her nerves, instead of stirring them. "You came a long way," Mara said. "Your horse near collapsed." "Long ride from Montana line," he replied between bites. "What brings you south?" Cade hesitated. The spoon hovered a moment. "Needed new ground for a while." Tomas raised an eyebrow. "Trouble with the law," Cade snorted softly. "Nothing that dramatic. Just needed distance." Mara didn't press. She knew better than to demand a stranger's story. He'd tell it when he chose to. Outside, a faint noise snapped both Tomas and Cade to a tension metal against wood. Not loud, but not accidental. Mara froze. Tomas' straightened hand going to the knife again. Hear that Cade placed his spoon down quietly. "Back fence." "How can you tell?" Mara whispered. Sound carried from the north. Someone trying to move careful. Cade's eyes sharpened. "They're not good at it." He rose to his feet despite the exhaustion weighing on him. He scanned the room, eyes landing on the rifle by the door. Tomas moved to grab it first. "You don't touch that." Cade didn't argue. "You want someone at the back door or by the window?" Tomas paused, studying him. Testing. Cade held his gaze without flinching. His body alert, not aggressive. Finally, Tomas jerked his chin toward the window. "There." Cade obeyed, stepping beside the curtain without drawing attention to himself. Mara forced her breath steady. She moved to the lamp and turned down the flame until the room dimmed. Her heart pounded loud enough she worried someone outside might hear it. The night pressed in tight around the house. Another sound, faint like a boot scraping loose rock. Cade whispered. 2 men. Maybe 3. They're checking your fences. Mara's blood iced. Prescott. Tomas swore under his breath. They came fast. Mara's throat tightened. If they came to scare us. They will, Cade said quietly. But not tonight. She glanced at him. How can you be so sure a man testing your fence doesn't want a confrontation yet? He just wants to learn what he's dealing with. Mara swallowed hard. And what do you think I'm dealing with? Cade's eyes softened. Not with pity, but with understanding. A man who's used to taking what he wants. She looked toward the darkness swallowing the yard. Her father's ranch. Her father's land. Her home. All of it felt one breath away from being stripped from her hands. The scraping stopped. No footsteps followed. Silence spread across the valley like a blanket. After a long moment, Tomas lowered his knife. They're gone. For now, Cade added. Mara breathed out slowly. They'll be back. Cade met her eyes. Yes. And next time they won't be looking at your fences. She felt the truth like a blow. Outside, the wind pushed against the walls, whispering the rest of the warning she didn't want to hear. Tomas exhaled long and worried. We can't stay like this, Mara. We need a plan. Mara looked at the stranger sitting in her kitchen, the one who'd arrived on a dying horse exactly when someone else approached her land in the dark. Cade Holt didn't feel like coincidence. Not anymore. What kind of plan? She asked. Tomas's jaw tightened. You know which one. Mara's breath caught. The impossible plan. The desperate one. She looked at Cade again. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, alive, following every shift in her face. The air trembled between what she feared and what she knew she had to do. Tomorrow she'd have to choose, and the choice would change everything. There are eyes in that darkness, Mara eyes that ain't wolf nor man, but something hungry in between. Cade Holt said it low, like he didn't want the night to hear him, and Mara wished she could tell herself he was wrong. But ever since she'd walked out of Judge Warfield's office and felt Silas Blackstone's gaze settle between her shoulder blades, she'd known the valley wasn't empty anymore. Something followed her. Something patient. Pushing past the tight knot in her throat, she stepped onto the porch. The lantern's dim glow reached only a few feet into the night before surrendering to the dark. Beyond that faint circle of light, the ranch stretched quiet and wide. Too quiet. Cade stood at the porch rail, rifle resting against his thigh, shoulders loose but alert. He looked like he'd peeled off years of exhaustion the moment danger brushed the fence line. Tomas had gone to check the barn doors one more time, muttering curses at Blackstone with every step. Mara moved beside Cade, trying to match his calm. You're sure you heard something out there? Cade nodded once. 2 somethings, actually. One on foot, one on a horse keeping distance. The horse stepped wrong on a rock out near the back pasture. That's the sound that made me look. Mara stared into the dark heartbeat picking up. Prescott wouldn't be alone. No, Cade agreed. Cowards don't come alone. She swallowed. What do they want tonight? To see how you react, he said simply. Figure how scared you are. Learn when you sleep and how deep. They're testing you, Mara. Testing her like they tested fence posts before cutting wire or cattle before stealing them. Testing her like prey. She hugged her arms around herself as a gust of wind rolled over the yard, rattling the loose boards on the chicken coop. "My father protected this place," she whispered. "He kept the valley quiet." Cade's eyes softened, but his voice stayed steady. "Your father ain't here now, but the land remembers him, and so do the wrong men. That's why they're pushing you." Mara's pulse skittered. "I don't know how to fight men like Blackstone." "You don't fight him head-on," Cade said. "You outthink him." She looked at him then, lantern light catching the sharp lines of his face. "You seem to know a lot about these kinds of men." "Men like that mark their own trail," he said, turning back to the darkness. "I've followed it more than once." She wanted to ask more, how he knew who he'd fought, what he'd lost, but the rustle near the ridge snapped her attention back. Cade lifted the rifle a few inches, eyes narrowing. Mara's breath locked in her chest. Something moved behind the fence, low and slow, a shape barely visible in the thin moonlight. "Cade," she whispered. He shook his head. "Wait." The shape lingered, watching, listening. Tomas jogged up the porch steps, breathing hard. "I checked the barn. Nothing new, but the chickens are spooked for no reason." Cade tilted his chin toward the ridge. "We got company again." Tomas froze, hand going to his knife. "You sure?" Shh. Mara tightened her grip on the porch rail. "Listen." The three of them stood silent. Crickets, wind, a shifting weight in the dark, the faint jingle of a loose saddle buckle. Tomas mouthed, hoarse. Cade nodded. Mara forced a breath. "They're waiting for us to turn in. They want to see if they can scare us without being seen." "That's how it starts," Tomas said, jaw tight. "They circle you until you're too tired and scared to think straight." The idea made her stomach twist. Nights that once felt wide and comforting now felt like a cage. Cade lowered the rifle. "They're holding back for now. They won't rush in tonight." "How can you be so sure?" Tomas asked. "Because they don't know me yet." Cade glanced at Mara. They weren't expecting an extra set of eyes on this porch. A strange warmth flickered through her chest, relief, gratitude, something she wasn't ready to name. But the fear still pressed harder. Cade gestured toward the door. "You two should rest. I'll take the first watch." "No," Mara said quickly. "You haven't slept in days. Won't be the first time I've gone sunup to sunup without it." She shook her head. "Cade, you're barely standing. I stood long before I got here. Tonight's no different." His voice wasn't arrogant, just factual. Like exhaustion didn't matter when danger breathed down your neck. Tomas crossed his arms. "We'll take shifts. Mara, go inside. We'll deal with this." Mara hesitated. She wanted to stay, wanted to glare into the dark until it blinked first. But her body felt heavy, her nerves frayed thin from hours of fear. She touched the porch post, grounding herself. "If anything changes, you'll hear us," Tomas said gently. She nodded and stepped inside. The house felt too quiet, too small. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cold stew left in Cade's bowl. The silence pressed against her ears until she could almost hear her father's voice. "Don't let fear drive your decisions, little one. It always chooses the wrong road." She closed her eyes. "I'm trying, Pa." Outside, Cade walked the porch with quiet steps. His shadow passed the window again and again, a steady shape cutting through the dark. Somehow that steadiness pulled her breath back into her lungs. Minutes stretched, maybe hours. She wasn't sure. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her down long enough that she drifted into a shallow sleep at the table. A new sound pulled her awake footsteps. Fast ones. Tomas burst through the door, eyes wide. "Mara!" She jumped to her feet. "What happened?" "Your north fence. Someone cut the wire." Her blood turned hot and cold at once. "Now." "Just now," Tomas said. "Saw the glint of the wire fall. They're testing how you respond." Cade stepped in behind him, jaw set. "They're bold tonight. Bolder than I expected." Mara steadied herself against the table. "Why cut the fence if they weren't planning to rush in?" "Because Cade said they want you rattled when you wake. They want you to spend tomorrow fixin' the wrong thing, while they plan the real blow." Tomas nodded grimly. "He's right." Mara stared at them both. "So what do we do?" Cade looked at her with a calm she didn't have yet. "You do the same thing you did today. You stand." She swallowed. "For how long?" "Until you decide on something better." His eyes held hers, something steady passing between them, trust, maybe, or the first hint of it. The night still pressed against the windows. The danger still sat outside. But Mara felt a shift, a small one, fragile and new. Tomas sheathed his knife. "Tomorrow we can't keep pretending we can patch this problem." Mara nodded slowly. "I know." Cade walked back to the door, eyes tracking the dark beyond the porch. "And tomorrow," he said, "we talk about that plan Tomas mentioned." Her breath caught. The impossible plan. The cattle. The drive. The one chance she had left. Fear and hope tangled sharp inside her, but she didn't back down from either. Tomorrow she would face it. Tomorrow everything would change. Blackstone can take land. He can take law. But he can't take what's branded with your father's iron. Mara Redbird stared at Cade Holt across the kitchen table, her breath unsteady, her body still trembling from the night's danger. Dawn had not yet broken. The lamp cast soft gold over the walls, but nothing about the moment felt warm. The house smelled of cold stew and smoke, but beneath it all was the heavier scent of fear that had been thick in the air since she'd returned from town. Tomas Ortega stood with his back to the door, arms crossed, tight eyes locked on Cade like he wasn't sure if he agreed with him or wanted to argue. Or both. Mara forced her fingers to unclench from the edge of the table. "Explain," she said, voice low. Cade leaned forward, elbows resting on the scarred wood. His eyes held none of last night's exhaustion. Danger had burned that away. He looked sharp now, sharp enough to cut truth clean. "You asked how long you're supposed to keep standing," he said. "The answer is only long enough to get moving." Mara shook her head. "Moving where I can't leave the ranch." "If I do, if you stay, you lose it," Cade interrupted gently. "Blackstone will bleed you dry with the law. He'll take your home and your name, but he can't take your cattle. Not yet." Tomas exhaled slowly. "He's right, Mara." She looked between them, fear coiling low in her stomach. Why the cattle are on the ranch? How can he not take them because Cade said they're not collateral in the loan? Only the land was pledged. You've got nearly 300 head, all branded Redbird, all legally yours. Mara's heart stuttered. "So what does that mean?" "It means Tomas said that if you sell the herd, you can pay the debt on your own terms, before he comes to take the land," Cade added. "Before he takes you." The words hit hard, honest, brutal, necessary. She sank back into her chair, mind racing. "Sell the herd, but the nearest buyers are weeks away." Cheyenne Thomas confirmed. 300 miles, Cade said. Give or take depending on the path. Mara felt the weight of every mile in that distance. "And you're talking about driving the cattle there, yes," Cade said. She gawked at him. "Just like that." "Not just like that," Tomas muttered. "We'll need riders, supplies, a route that keeps us out of Blackstone's hands." Cade nodded. "And time, which we don't have." The idea felt impossible, reckless. But there was a logic to it, a cold, clear thread she couldn't ignore. "We'd have to cross Bitter Canyon," she said, "and the Valley Plains, and the river crossing past Owl Bluff." Done harder before Cade said, "Not with Blackstone breathing down our necks," she whispered. "That's why it'll work," he said softly. "He won't expect you to run your whole herd right out from under him." Tomas pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her. "Mara, your father would have taken this chance." The ache of that truth pressed deep under her ribs. Cade's voice dropped lower. "Mara, you're fightin' a man who believes you're cornered. You give him the impression you're frozen, scared, easy to crush. He'll tighten the trap, and he'll win." She lifted her gaze to his. Cade didn't look away. "But if you make a move he doesn't expect," he tapped the table softly, "if you hit fast and hard your way, then maybe you stand a chance." Mara felt her pulse in her throat. "And if we fail," Cade shrugged lightly, "then you fall while fightin', not kneelin'." The room went quiet. Outside, a rooster crowed faintly, signaling the first edge of dawn. The sky beyond the window shifted from black to gray-blue, thin light creeping into the valley. Mara breathed deeply. She imagined Cheyenne. She imagined selling the herd. She imagined Silas Blackstone's face when she paid the debt without giving him anything he wanted. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, "Courage ain't the absence of fear, little one. Courage is keeping your feet when fear grabs you by the throat." Mara stood slowly from the table. Tomas straightened, hope flickering across his face. Cade didn't move, but something in his expression shifted expectation, maybe. Mara placed both palms on the table and steadied herself. "If we do this," how Cade rose too, not looming, just meeting her at eye level. "First thing, we need riders. People we trust." Tomas nodded. "I can think of 2 in town. And Stone Bear might join us if the pay's fair." And his cousin Nari, Mara said. "She knows trails and river crossings better than anyone." Cade approved with a small nod. "Good. The more eyes, the better." Mara swallowed. "What about supplies?" "I'll make a ride at first light," Tomas said. "We'll need beans, coffee rope ammunition, new tack for Clover." Cade looked toward the window, scanning the ridgeline automatically. "Blackstone's scouts will notice movement. If we're gathering a crew, we need to do it quiet." "And fast," Tomas added. "Before Prescott figures we're planning something." Mara felt the familiar surge of fear, but it didn't drown her this time. It sharpened instead, like a blade honed against stone. She looked between them, grounding herself in the impossibility of what lay ahead. Then she said the words that made Tomas exhale with relief, and Cade nod once, steady and measured. "We drive the cattle." The decision settled into her chest like an anchor and a spark at the same time. Tomas slapped the side of his leg. "Then we start now." Cade walked to the door, checking the rifle. "If we're leaving tomorrow, we need to round up the herd tonight. Keep 'em close to the north pasture." Mara's breath hitched. Tomorrow, so soon, Cade turned to her with a calm she wished she could borrow. "Later than that, and Blackstone will take the choice from you." The truth of it was undeniable. Mara inhaled a slow, shaking breath. "I'll help Tomas get the horses ready. Then I'll scout the ridge," Cade said. "Make sure Prescott didn't leave us a gift in the dark." Tomas smirked. Wouldn't put it past him. Cade pushed the door open, morning gray, spilling inside. Before stepping out, he paused and looked back at Mara. You're making the right call. How do you know? Because it's the one you're scared of. That's usually the one worth taking. She held his gaze a long moment, her heart beating louder than the quiet dawn around them. Cade stepped off the porch and disappeared into the dim light. Tomas grabbed his hat. We best move, Mara. A herd don't round itself. Right, she said softly. But before she followed, she looked toward the dark horizon, toward the land that had raised her and the danger that hunted her. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried the weight of everything she had left. This ranch won't fall without a fight. A cold breeze swept across the yard as if answering her, and far beyond the fence line, hidden in the last shadows of night, something moved, watching, waiting. Blackstone wasn't done. And tomorrow he'd learn she wasn't either. Freedom costs more than land or cattle. Freedom costs blood, fear, and who you let stand beside you. Mara Redbird heard Dr. Lydia Crow speak those words as clearly as she heard the wind moving through the dry cottonwoods behind the old healer's cabin. The morning sun pressed down warm on her shoulders, but the weight in her chest felt heavier than the heat. They had ridden at first light, Tomas toward town to gather supplies, Cade to scout the ridge for trouble, and Mara alone toward the sage flat where Dr. Crow lived. She needed wisdom. She needed clarity. Mostly she needed someone who understood the land and the danger coiling through it better than anyone else she knew. Dr. Lydia Crow stepped onto her porch, her gray-black braid falling over one shoulder, her dark eyes sharp as flint. The lines on her face spoke of both laughter and grief, and the long years she'd lived between two worlds, Arapaho medicine woman and Western frontier midwife. She looked Mara over once slowly. Your heart is too loud, child. Mara swallowed hard. Then you already know. I knew the moment you came riding so fast you forgot to tie your braid properly. Dr. Crow's mouth lifted in a small, wry smile. Come. Sit. Tell me what storm you walked out of. Mara dismounted and joined her on the porch, taking the worn cedar bench beside her. The valley stretched wide and golden around them. Grass whispered. Birds cut lines across the pale morning sky. The world looked peaceful, which made the danger in her life feel even more suffocating. Dr. Crow poured 2 cups of willow bark tea. Mara took hers with both hands, grounding herself in the warmth. It's Blackstone, Mara said. Dr. Crow chuckled without humor. Of course it is. I warned your father years ago that man would cast a shadow over this valley longer than any mountain. Now it seems the shadow has reached your door. He wants the ranch, Mara whispered. He wants power, Dr. Crow corrected. The ranch is simply the shape it takes today. Mara nodded. He gave me a choice. Marry him, or lose everything. Dr. Crow's expression cooled into something fierce. A cage with silk ribbons is still a cage. Last night, Mara continued, Prescott's men prowled the fence. They cut the wire. Dr. Crow's jaw tightened. Testing boundaries. They are choosing the moment to strike. Mara closed her eyes, the memory of that deep, uneasy dark pulsing through her. I can't stay and wait, good Dr. Crow said softly. Waiting is how women like you are broken. Her voice softened, then losing its sharp edge. So, you have a plan. Mara nodded. Cade Holt, the stranger who arrived last night. He knows men like Blackstone. He says we drive the cattle to Cheyenne, sell the herd, pay the debt ourselves. Dr. Crow sipped her tea, assessing Mara with unnerving calm. A long trail. A dangerous one. The kind only desperate souls take. It's our only way. The older woman studied her face quiet for several long moments. Then she spoke, "Freedom costs more than land or cattle. Freedom costs blood, fear, and who you let stand beside you." The words sank deep into Mara's bones. "You trust this man?" Dr. Crow asked. "No," Mara admitted. "Not yet. But I believe him. That is different, and sometimes better." Mara looked down at her cup. A small leaf floated on the surface. "Do you think this plan will work?" "I think your father raised you to fight with your spine straight and your eyes open to," Crow said gently. "And I think the valley is watching to see if his daughter remembers who she is." Mara felt a tight ache in her throat. "I do remember." "Good." Dr. Crow rose. "Then let me give you something." She disappeared inside and returned with a small leather pouch tied with sinew. She placed it in Mara's palm. "What is it?" Mara asked. "Something for protection," Dr. Crow said. "A blend of cedar sage and red willow bark. It won't stop bullets or hunger, but it may steady your spirit on nights when the valley tries to swallow you." Mara closed her hand around it. "Thank you." "You ride with people you trust now," Dr. Crow said. "Not alone. And remember, the land listens to courage, even when the world does not." Mara nodded and stood. She hugged Dr. Crow tightly, something she hadn't expected to do, and the older woman rested a hand on her back. "Go," Crow whispered. "The sun is rising fast, and danger always wakes early." Mara mounted Clover and rode off, the healer watching her, until she faded into the rolling sage. By the time Mara reached the ranch, Tomas had already returned with sacks of beans, coffee ammo, and rope strapped to the wagon. He waved as she rode in. "Got most of what we need," he said. "Town's whispering more than usual. Guess word's getting around." "About Blackstone?" Mara asked. "About you," Tomas said. "Folks ain't used to seeing someone stand when a man tries to step on their neck." Before she could answer, Cade emerged from the barn. Dirt smudged one cheek. He'd been working hard. "Found fresh tracks up on the ridge," he said. 3 riders. They weren't hiding either. Mara's pulse quickened. Meaning, Blackstone knows you're cornered," Cade replied. "But he doesn't know you're getting ready to run, not yet." "Good," Tomas said. "Then we still have surprise." Cade nodded toward the open field. "We should bring the herd in early. If we leave at first light tomorrow, we need them close." Mara swung down from her saddle. "Then let's start." They spent the next hours rounding up cattle. The air filled with dust and lowing and the steady thud of hooves. Cade moved with quiet efficiency, guiding strays with sharp whistles and tight rein turns. Tomas rode hard, keeping the flanks steady. Mara worked the center sweat, slicking her neck, her braid whipping behind her. By late afternoon, they had gathered nearly 300 head in the north pasture, closer to the trailhead leading toward Bitter Canyon. Cade wiped his brow. "Tomorrow's gonna be hell." "Tomorrow's gonna be a start," Mara said. He gave her a look that almost resembled a smile. Almost. Tomas rode up beside them. "I sent word to Stone Bear. If he's willing, he'll meet us by midnight." "And the Harmon brothers?" Mara asked. "Already on their way." Cade's gaze moved toward the distant horizon. "Good. We'll need every hand we can get." Mara felt the weight of what was coming, the danger, the risk, the miles of unforgiving land settle on her shoulders. but she also felt something else. Resolve. She tightened her hold on Clover's reins. "We leave at first light." Cade nodded. "And we pray Blackstone's men don't catch on before dawn." Mara's heart pounded at the truth of it. Night was coming, and with it the last quiet moment before everything changed. Because tonight riders would come, and tomorrow they would ride. "Ma'am, if we take this job, we ain't ridin' for money. We're ridin' for your name." The fire crackled in the yard behind the barn, its light throwing sharp gold across the faces gathered around it. Night pressed in close across Redbird Ranch, deeper and darker than the night before. The cattle murmured quietly in the north pasture, restless, because they sensed something was about to break loose. A change of wind. A shift of fate. Mara Redbird stood at the edge of the firearms wrapped around herself. Her heart hadn't stopped its nervous beat since sundown. Every hour felt like rope tightening around her ribs. Tomas Ortega emerged from the shadows first. "They're comin'," he said softly. Mara lifted her chin. "All of them sounds like it." Cade Holt stepped beside her close enough she could feel the heat coming off him from the long day's work. "Remember what you said earlier," he murmured. "This ranch won't fall without a fight. Riders like these," he nodded toward the dark road beyond the fence, "they're the first line of it." Hoofbeats shuddered through the night, slow and sure. 3 riders broke from the dark. Stone Bear, tall and steady as a pine, his braids tied with strips of red cloth. His cousin Nari, quiet as moonlight, her expression unreadable. And behind them rode the Harmon brothers Levi and Cole, laughing with the kind of reckless ease that only troublemakers possessed. Stone Bear dismounted first and approached Mara with a solemn nod. "Your message reached us." "Thank you for coming," Mara said. "We came because Tomas said the valley is turning dangerous." Stone Bear's gaze sharpened. "And because a shadow is trying to swallow your land." Nari stepped forward, offering Mara a small pouch of dried herbs. "Protection for the trail. Not magic," she added calmly, "but courage often needs something to hold." Mara accepted it gently. "Thank you." The Harmon brothers rode in behind them and slid off their horses with matching grins. Levi tipped his hat. "Evenin', Miss Redbird. Tomas told us you're fixin' to make a run to Cheyenne." Cole added, "Which is insane." Then he winked. "We like insane." Cade crossed his arms and studied the group with an assessing eye. "We'll need every one of you if we want to get out of this valley with the herd intact." Stone Bear's gaze drifted toward the cattle penned in the pasture. 300 head, 284, Tomas corrected. "Lost a couple in last year's dry spell." Stone Bear nodded. "Still a strong herd." Cade stepped into this firelight. "Listen close, all of you. Blackstone's scouts are thick on the ridges. Prescott's already sliced the fence. We're dealing with men who don't know how to fight fair." Cole snorted. "Fair fights are boring." Stone Bear ignored him. "If we go with you, Mara Redbird, we go because we believe your cause is worth the danger." Mara opened her mouth, but Tomas stepped forward first, voice hard and clear. "This isn't a hired job. This is a stand." Levi leaned his elbow on his saddle. "Mind explainin' what exactly we're standin' against?" Cade answered. "A man who wants to take everything she has." Silence settled briefly. The fire popped. Then Stone Bear spoke again. "Say the word, Mara. We'll ride for you." Mara felt the weight of every mile ahead, the rivers, the canyon, the night stampedes, the wolves, the men with guns, the possibility of death. But more than that, she felt the weight of her father's memory, the ranch he'd built, the land that held his stories. the life he wanted for her. She stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. I don't have money to pay you proper. Levi shrugged. Didn't ask for it. Cole tipped his hat again. We ain't riding for money. Stone Bear looked straight at her eyes, dark and unwavering. We're riding for your name. The words hit her like a punch to the chest, but a good one. A steadying one. Cade glanced at her, then almost like he needed to make sure she heard it as deeply as he had. She did. Thomas grinned for the first time in days. Then it settled. But the night wasn't finished with them. A new set of hoofbeats cut across the valley from the south this time. Cade instantly reached for his rifle. Stone Bear placed a hand on the haft of the knife at his belt. Nari's fingers flickered toward the bow she kept strapped to her saddle. Mara froze as the rider approached the lone shape moving slowly into the ring of firelight. Deputy Hank Laramie. His uniform was dusty, his hat tilted low, his horse lathered from a hard ride. He lifted both hands to show he carried no weapon drawn. Mara, he said, breath uneven. I needed to warn you. Tomas bristled. If you're here to drag her to Blackstone, I'm not. Hank cut in sharply. You think I don't know what Blackstone's doing? You think I don't see what he's turning this valley into? He wiped sweat from his brow, eyes darting toward the dark hills. He's angry. More than angry. Prescott told him you refused again. And now what? Mara asked. Deputy Laramie swallowed hard. He's riding out before dawn, with 5 men. The fire crackled louder in the silence that followed. Cole cursed softly. Levi spat into the dirt. Nari's eyes narrowed. Stone Bear's expression tightened into iron. Cade stepped forward calm but sharp-edged. How long till he's on this property? 2 hours, Hank said. Maybe less. I rode here first. Figured you deserved a warning if you're truly leaving. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. He knows, he suspects. Hank nodded. He ain't certain, but he's not taking chances. So he's coming to force me before we can move, she whispered. Yes. The fear that had been building inside her all day finally solidified into something sharper, resolve. Unshakable. Cade turned to the group. Then we leave before sunrise. Earlier than planned. Tomas grabbed the reins of his horse. We need the herd moving within the hour. Wake the brothers, Levi said, already jogging toward the corral. I'll get the flank. Stone Bear spoke to Mara, voice low and steady. This is your moment. Once we start this drive, there's no turning back. I know. Cade stepped close, his voice quiet but anchored. You ready? Mara looked at the gathered riders, the cattle stirring the dark horizon, where Blackstone would soon appear, like a storm rolling toward her home. She nodded. I'm ready. Cade's mouth curved into the faintest hint of approval. Good. Then let's ride. The riders scattered to their tasks, preparing the herd, the tack, the horses, the route. Mara looked once more at the house, her father's house, knowing it might be the last time she saw it whole. She tightened her grip on Clover's reins. The night was no longer quiet. The night was a countdown. And when dawn rose, they would already be miles away, driving the only chance she had left straight into danger, straight toward freedom. Buying rope and beans in a town run by Blackstone ain't shopping Mara. It's war. Tomas Ortega had said it at dawn when they saddled up for town, and the words stayed with Mara Redbird as Clover's hooves clopped across the packed dirt road leading into Wind River. The sky was bright and warm, but there was no comfort in it. The sun only made the dust sharper, the stairs harder, and the truth clearer. The entire valley was watching. The cattle drive would start tonight. But before they hit the trail, they needed supplies enough to survive it. Cade Holt rode on her left, Stone Bear on her right. Tomas drove the wagon behind them, Naria, walking alongside with her bow slung casually at her back. The Harmon brothers had split off an hour earlier to gather more horses from a livery a few miles south. The plan was simple: get in, buy what they needed, get out before word traveled up the ridge to Blackstone's men. But Wind River wasn't a place where simple plans stayed simple. The moment Mara crossed the wooden bridge into town, conversation dimmed. Heads turned. A few men touched the brims of their hats respectfully. Others didn't bother hiding the pity or curiosity in their eyes. Women paused mid-step at the mercantile doorway. Old men leaning against the hitching post stopped chewing their tobacco. Children stared openly. Mara kept her chin high. Easy, Cade murmured. Don't look anyone in the eye unless you want an invite to trouble. She tried, but her heart hammered hard enough she felt it in her throat. She'd grown up riding into this town with her father. They'd sold hides here, bought grain here, laughed here. But that was before Blackstone set his sight on the Redbird name. Before her father got sick. Before the rumor mill spun her into something she wasn't. A woman in a blue dress whispered to her friend, loud enough Mara heard. That's the girl Blackstone means to marry. Mara's cheeks burned. Stone Bear growled under his breath. Keep riding, he said gently. They tied off at the post outside the mercantile. Tomas hopped down from the wagon and began unloading empty sacks. You three go inside, he said. I'll get the feed. Narii shook her head. You shouldn't be alone. I'm fine, Tomas replied. Go with Mara. I'll be quick. Inside the mercantile, the air was cooler, shaded by the overhanging roof and crowded shelves. Halpern, the wiry shopkeeper, stiffened the moment he saw Mara. Miss Redbird, he said, wiping his hands on his apron. Didn't expect you today. She offered a polite nod. We need supplies. His eyes flicked to Cade, then to Stone Bear, then back to her. Big supplies. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Halpern swallowed hard. All right. Tell me what you need. She listed beans, coffee flour, salt, 2 lanterns, 4 coils of rope, ammunition for 3 rifles and 2 revolvers, and every strip of jerky he had left. As Halpern hurried to fetch them, a few townsfolk drifted inside, pretending to browse but really listening. Cade leaned in close to Mara. Remember what I said, don't react unless you need to. She nodded. They reached the counter with their supplies just as Tomas came in. Halpern wrapped each item with shaking hands, then cleared his throat. This much gear, he said carefully, means a long ride. Mara met his eyes. Yes, I hear Silas Blackstone's riding out this morning, Halpern murmured. Hard, with men. We heard Cade said. A door opened behind them. Mara stiffened instantly, sensing the shift in the room. Prescott. Blackstone's right-hand man stepped in like he owned the place, boots, heavy coat, dark hat, low, overshadowed eyes. A thin scar cut down his cheek, white against tanned skin. He didn't look at Halpern. He didn't look at Tomas. He looked only at Mara. Well now, he drawled. Ain't this something? Cade stepped half an inch in front of her. Not enough to block her. Just enough to cut the line between her and Prescott. Stone Bear quietly positioned himself to the left, Naria to the right. Prescott's smile crooked. Buying a lot of trail goods, Miss Redbird. You plannin' a picnic? Mara kept her hands steady on the counter. Buyin' what I need. Oh, I'm sure. He stepped closer, boots thudding, breath smelling faintly of whiskey. Blackstone sent word you've been unruly. Turned down his offer. Again. His gaze flicked to Cade. Seems you found company to encourage your bad thinking. Cade's voice came low. We're just here for supplies. Oh, I know why you're here. Prescott smiled like a man holding a knife behind his back. But what I'm wondering, he tapped the rope coil on the counter, is why the hell you need all this. Mara refused to flinch. That's my business. It'll be Blackstone's business soon enough. Tomas's jaw tightened. Step back, Prescott. Prescott ignored him. Leaving town, are you gonna run from what's owed? Mara steadied her breath. I'm not running. Oh, then what are you doing with 300 head penned on your land? His voice rose enough for everyone in the store to hear. That's what my boys saw at dawn. The room froze. Cold fear sank deep into Mara's stomach. Cade's tone shifted from calm to lethal. You watch her ranch at dawn. Prescott laughed. We watch whatever Blackstone tells us to watch. Stonebear stepped forward. You've overstepped. Prescott's smile thinned. If she's moving cattle, that's against Blackstone's claim. He'll send the law after her. Cade stepped right into Prescott's space. She ain't breaking anything except your boss's pride. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Prescott's fingers twitched toward his coat, not enough to draw, but enough to threaten. Might be best you all head home, he said softly. Wouldn't want trouble before the sun sets. Cade didn't move. Trouble's already here. Halpern's voice cracked. Boys, please, not in my shop. Mara placed a steady hand on Cade's arm, grounding them both. We're leaving. Prescott tilted his head, studied her, then smirked. Run while you can, Miss Redbird. Blackstone's comin', and he don't take kindly to thieves. She didn't answer. She lifted the sacks with trembling strength. Tomas grabbed the rest, and together they exited into the bright glare of day. Outside, Cade exhaled once sharply. He knows. Not everything, Tomas said. He knows we're preparing. Not that we're leaving tonight. Mara stared at the dust drifting across the road, her pulse racing. He will, soon. Stonebear tied his supplies to his saddle. All the more reason to move quickly. Narii nodded. Tonight, then. Yes, Mara said firmly. Tonight. Cade swung into his saddle eyes, scanning the ridges where scouts might already be watching. We need to get home, pack fast, and be on our way before the stars settle. We've got a long night ahead. Mara mounted Clover. Behind her, Prescott stepped out of the mercantile and leaned against the porch post, watching them go, with a thin, expectant grin. She didn't look back. They rode out of Wind River, surrounded by silenced dust and tension coiled tight as a wire ready to snap. Because the next time she entered this town, everything would be different, if she was lucky enough to enter it at all. They rode toward Redbird Ranch, toward the herd, toward the first light of their escape, and toward the opening of Bitter Canyon waiting like a mouth of stone. You said you wouldn't bend, Mara. Well, stand up straight now, because at dawn, you lead. The words echoed in Mara Redbird's mind long before dawn touched the valley. She had barely slept. No one had. The ranch had churned with motion through the night. Horses saddled supplies, packed the cattle, herded tight into the north pasture riders, taking turns scanning the ridges for Blackstone's men. Every hour they'd expected the thunder of hooves coming down on them. But the valley stayed eerily still. Too still. Now a thin strip of pale rose light stretched low across the horizon, brushing the mountains with color. The sky brightened, the stars thinned, and Mara's heart pounded like a warning drum. Cade Holt rode toward her out of the dim morning haze, guiding his horse with one hand and holding her father's old trail map in the other. He looked more awake than any man should after the night they'd had, calm, steady, forged by the kind of danger that sharpened rather than shook him. He pulled up beside her. "It's time." Her breath trembled. "Are the others ready?" "They're waiting for you," Cade said. "We move when you say." Mara swallowed hard. She didn't feel ready to lead. She didn't feel ready for anything except fear. But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not today. Not ever again. Stone Bear rode up next, adjusting the strap of his bow. We checked the ridge. No movement. "That doesn't mean they're gone," Cade said. "Just means they're hiding better." Nari joined them, her horse pacing quietly beneath her. "The cattle are restless. They sense the urgency, or they sense Blackstone," Tomas muttered as he rode in from the opposite side. "Either way, we need to move before he wakes the valley." Behind them, Levi and Cole Harmon were already mounted, still yawning, but grinning with the reckless excitement of men who liked trouble a little too much. Cole called out, "You ready to make history, Miss Redbird?" Mara's lips twitched with something close to a smile. History wasn't what I had planned for this week. Levi laughed. History rarely waits for permission. Cade angled his horse so that he was directly in front of her. "Look at me." She did. "You were born in this valley," he said. "You know it better than any of us. Today you're trail boss. They'll follow your lead." Mara's throat tightened. "I don't know if yes," Cade said quietly, firm enough to stop her. "You do." The first true rays of sun broke over the horizon, spilling gold onto the north pasture. The cattle shifted, snorted load. Hundreds of bodies pressed together, impatient. Their breath rose in clouds against the cold morning. They knew the world was about to change. Mara took a deep breath and let it fill her chest. Fear didn't vanish, but it moved aside just enough to let courage stand beside it. "Let's ride," she said. Cade nodded once, approval glinting subtly in his eyes. "Open the gate." Tomas and Levi swung their horses into position and hauled the north gate open. The herd surged forward, hooves thundering across the chilled ground. Dust lifted. The sound of cattle, soft at first, deepened into a steady, powerful roar. Mara nudged Clover forward. The mare responded instantly, ears sharp, muscles tense with shared anticipation. The moment Clover passed through the gate, Mara felt it. A shift. Like she'd stepped out of who she'd been and into who she had to become. She rose in her stirrups and shouted back to the riders, "Keep them tight. Aim for the east ridge straight toward Bitter Canyon." Cade rode on her right flank, Tomas on her left. Stone Bear and Nari took point along the outer edges, guiding stragglers. The Harmon brothers worked the rear, pushing the last reluctant cows forward, with whistles and boots in the dust. They moved as a unit, rough-tired, determined. The last of the ranch faded behind them as the sun climbed. Mara glanced back once. Her father's home, the barn, the water tower, the corral. Part of her expected Blackstone's riders to burst into view at that exact moment, galloping down hard to claim what wasn't theirs. But nothing appeared. The ranch stood silent, still, slowly shrinking in the distance. Cade followed her gaze. "Don't mourn it now," he said softly. "Fight for it first." She faced forward, jaw set. They pushed the herd along the narrow trail leading toward the rising slopes of the East Ridge. Bitter Canyon's opening waited just beyond that high ground, a dangerous bottleneck, but the only route Blackstone wouldn't expect this early. Stone Bear's voice drifted back toward them. Tracks on the upper ridge faint, but recent. Mara's pulse spiked. Scouts, Cade studied the terrain. No dust trail. They're watching, not moving. Why aren't they coming down, she asked. Because they don't understand what they're seeing yet, Stone Bear said. Blackstone won't believe you'd run the herd this fast. Mara exhaled in shaky relief. Good. But the relief didn't last. As the herd reached the first slope of the ridge, Cade lifted a hand sharply. Hold! The riders slowed the cattle until the thunder of hooves eased into unsettled pacing. Cade guided his horse uphill and crouched low in the saddle scanning. Then he pointed. Dust, thin, far, rising near the hills to the west. Mara's stomach dropped. Is that? Yes, Cade said. Those are riders. Blackstone Tomas breathed. Not sure yet, Cade replied. But they're riding hard. Mara's heart thudded against her ribs. They'll catch us. Not if we move now, Stone Bear said. Cade turned to her. Call it Mara. Her breath caught. Then she yelled, full and loud voice cracking across the morning. Move the herd forward, straight to Bitter Canyon, now. The riders spurred into motion. The cattle surged again, driven by shouts and whistles and the rising energy of fear. Dust kicked high, rocks scattered under hooves. Clover ran sure-footed, her muscles bunching beneath Mara like stored power. Tomas shouted over the chaos. If we reach the canyon before they hit the ridge, we'll have the choke point, Cade finished. Is it safe? Levi called from behind. It's never safe, Cole shouted back. That's the fun part. Mara didn't laugh. She was too focused on the path ahead, a narrow split between two massive stone walls rising sharper with each passing second. Bitter Canyon's mouth looked like a wound carved into the land, and she was about to lead her entire world straight into it. Cade kept pace with her, his voice steady even as the herd thundered forward. You're doing fine. She didn't feel fine, but hearing it steadied her. The dust behind them grew thicker. The shadow of riders approached. Mara grit her teeth. Faster. The herd pushed into the canyon's mouth just as the sun climbed high enough to light the narrow stone walls in pale yellow. Stone Bear and Nari guided the first wave of cattle through the bottleneck. The Harmon brothers whooped and hollered, driving the rear. Cade stayed by Mara's side until the very last second before the canyon swallowed them. When the last cow vanished into the shadowed throat, he looked at her once more. You led, he said, and they followed. Then he wheeled his horse around, riding back toward the mouth of the canyon to watch the ridge, ready to face whatever came next. Mara didn't call him back. Fear runs faster in narrow places, Mara, and narrow places are where leaders either rise or break. The walls of Bitter Canyon rose on both sides like jagged slabs of rust-colored bone. The morning sun barely reached the canyon floor, leaving most of the narrow passage in bluish shadow. Mara Redbird felt the temperature drop as she guided Clover into the canyon's throat, the air cold and sharp enough to draw gooseflesh up her arms. Behind her, hundreds of cattle moved in a tight, restless line, their hooves clattering over stone. Dust rose in thin, ghostly trails but had nowhere to escape. The canyon swallowed sound, swallowed breath, swallowed certainty. Mara kept her gaze forward, but fear pressed at her spine the way the canyon walls pressed inward. Stone Bear rode ahead, steady and silent, guiding the front of the herd. Nari ghosted along the right flank, weaving between rocks with effortless grace, her bow always within reach. The Harmon brothers were somewhere behind, shouting occasionally to keep lagging cattle pushed forward. But Cade had stayed outside. He'd ridden back toward the canyon mouth to watch the ridge to buy them time if riders appeared. Mara tried not to imagine what would happen if he didn't come back. Tomas rode up beside her, cheeks flushed from effort. "They're moving slower than I like," he muttered, glancing at the cattle crowding behind them. "These walls sap their courage." "Not just theirs," Mara said under her breath. Tomas gave her a look, not pity, not worry, just understanding. "You're doing fine. We'll be through the first stretch soon." "How long is it? 5 miles, he said. "But the first mile is the tightest. After that we get wider lanes." "Blackstone." "No sign yet." His jaw tightened. "But if he's coming, he'll hit the mouth first." Mara tried not to think about Cade facing Blackstone's men alone at the canyon's entry. Tried and failed. The herd growled and shuffled behind them. Somewhere toward the middle, a cow lowed sharply, the sound echoing off the canyon walls in a way that made it difficult to place. Nari glanced over her shoulder. "The herd is anxious. The canyon does that to animals." "And people," Mara whispered. Before Nari could respond, Stone Bear appeared at the front of the column and signaled urgently. Mara's stomach dropped. "What is it, Trax?" he said, his deep voice steady but alert. "Fresh?" Blackstone Thomas asked. Stone Bear shook his head. "No. These are older. From yesterday, maybe the night before." "Scouts," Nara said. "Watching this route." Mara's pulse quickened. "But Blackstone wouldn't expect us through Bitter Canyon." "Would he?" "He wouldn't," Tomas said. "Which means these aren't his men." Mara frowned. "Then whose?" Stone Bear pointed farther up the canyon floor. A cluster of hoof prints crossed their path, not aligned with the trail. The prints led into a side cut, a narrow slit in the canyon wall barely wide enough for a horse. Nari murmured, "Someone rode through that pass." "Recently." Cole Harmon rode up chewing on a piece of dried grass. "What's the trouble?" Trax Tomas said. "Not Blackstone's." Cole's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Well, hell. Mystery riders. This trail's getting interesting." Levi rode up behind him and slapped the back of Cole's hat. "Quit being happy about it, idiot. Mystery riders usually mean bullets later." Stone Bear turned to Mara. "What do you want to do?" The question dropped like a stone in her stomach. She wasn't used to being asked that. Not about danger, not about direction. But Cade's voice echoed through her memory. "You lead, they follow." She steadied herself in the saddle. "We keep moving. We can't slow the herd for a pass we don't understand." Stone Bear nodded once. Agreed. Nari gave a small, approving dip of her chin. "Stay alert." They resumed the push, the herd shoving forward. The canyon narrowed again. The sound of hooves, rocks, and cattle ricocheted off the stone walls, building into a constant, restless roar. Mara's ears rang with it. The tight space amplified everything: her heartbeat, the cattle's fear, the slow grind of time. After another 20 minutes of steady driving, the canyon widened slightly, allowing a second lane for the herd to flow into. The suffocating pressure eased a little. Mara exhaled shakily. But relief didn't last. A sudden burst of hoofbeats thundered down from above, not ahead, not behind, but above. Levi shouted riders on the ridge. Mara jerked her head up. Dust cascaded from the ledges high above them. Shadows moved fast along the rim. But the sound was wrong. Too light. Too quick. Too many hoofbeats. Nari squinted upward. Not horses, she said calmly. What then? Tomas began. Then he stopped, because the sound wasn't hooves. It was falling rock. A rumble shook the canyon. Stone Bear's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Rockslide. Move the herd, the world exploded. Dust rained from the cliffs. Stones clattered down. A slab of rock the size of a wagon wheel slammed into the canyon floor 20 yards in front of Stone Bear's horse. Cattle screamed and surged. The herd panicked, pressing forward and sideways, the tight space magnifying their terror. "Turn them," Tomas shouted. "We need space before they crush each other." "Left flank," Nari yelled. "Push the calves away from the wall." Levi and Cole whooped and spurred their horses into the chaos, shouting, waving hats, cutting off the worst pressure points. Mara kicked Clover forward, heart-hammering. The mare responded instantly, weaving through the mess. Mara shouted, waved, guided, her voice rising above the cacophony. But fear spread faster than her commands. The canyon shook again. A massive chunk of stone tore loose from above and fell with a deafening crash, spraying shards across the trail. Clover reared. Mara clung to the saddle horn, teeth gritted, as her horse fought for footing. Mara Tomas yelled. "I'm fine," she shouted, though her pulse raced hard enough to hurt. Stone Bear rode into the fray, his horse steady despite the chaos. The slide is partial. The path ahead is still open. But we must move quickly. "Are we trapped?" Cole shouted. No, Stone Bear said. "But if another piece falls, we will be." Mara set her jaw. Her fear tried to claw up her throat, but something stronger pushed it back. "Cade said narrow places test leaders," she whispered. Then louder, with a force she didn't know she had, pushed the herd forward. "Stay tight, no gaps, keep them steady." The riders responded instantly. Stone Bear led the charge. Nari flanked the calves. Tomas and the Harmon brothers pushed the rear, shouting and waving like men trying to turn a river. Mara rode along the right side of the herd, guiding, calling, pushing Clover, moving beneath her like a living heartbeat. Bit by bit, foot by foot, they crawled past the worst of the rockfall. After several agonizing minutes, the canyon widened again, enough space to breathe, enough room for the cattle to spread. The rockslide faded behind them like a terrible dream. Tomas reached Mara first, panting. "You did it." "No," she said, chest heaving. "We did." Stone Bear rode up next. "There will be others," he warned. "Side passes, old trails, hidden watchers." Mara nodded. "I know." And she did. Because danger wasn't behind them anymore. It was all around them. Before anyone could say more, hoofbeats echoed from behind. This time unmistakably horses. Fast, hard, close. Nari's voice cut through the air. "That's not a rock slide." Mara turned sharply. At the far end of this canyon, where shadow met sunlight, Cade Holt burst into view at a full gallop, dust exploding behind him, his face carved in urgency. He shouted one word loud enough to crack through the canyon. Like thunder riders, Blackstone's men had arrived. "Hold the line even if your hands shake. Fear only wins when you drop the reins." Cade Holt's warning still echoed off the canyon walls as he tore toward the herd, dust erupting behind him like a storm. Blackstone's riders burst into view moments later, dark figures on fast horses, their silhouettes sharp against the glare of morning sun at the canyon's mouth. Mara Redbird jolted Clover forward. "Move the herd! Push them deeper!" Stone Bear bellowed orders in Arapaho. Tomas shouted at the rear. The Harmon brothers let out wild whoops as they raced to close the gap behind the cattle. Nari notched an arrow without a word. The canyon, already narrow, became a funnel of chaos. Hooves thundered, cattle bellowed. Dust choked the air in thick, stinging waves. Cade reached Mara first, Clover skidding as she turned toward him. His horse's chest heaved foam at the bit. How many, she demanded. 6, he said. Maybe 7. Prescott's leadin'. They'll try to break your back line. Will they shoot? His jaw tightened. If they think they can get away with it. A rifle cracked behind them. Mara flinched. Clover reared. Cade grabbed her reins before she could fall. We're out of time, Cade said sharply. Hold the line, Mara. Even if your hands shake. Fear only wins when you drop the reins. She swallowed hard and nodded. Then the riders closed in. Prescott's shout cut through the dust. Turn those cattle around. This drive ends now, Tomas cursed. Over my dead, another shot cracked. A bullet sparked off the canyon wall inches from Tomas's head. Stone Bear reacted first. He rode forward aggressively, guiding the front of the herd. Keep moving. If we choke the pass, we're dead. The cattle surged, frightened but forward-moving, opening a precious few feet of space. Cade spurred his horse and shouted back, Cole, Levi. With me, the Harmon brothers peeled off like wolves, riding straight toward the threat guns drawn, but pointed to the dirt, a warning, not a kill. Prescott's men fanned out, trying to circle the rear of the herd, but the canyon walls trapped them as much as they trapped Mara's riders. Nari loosed her arrow. It struck the stone inches from Prescott's boot, ricocheting off with a violent clang. A warning shot. A boundary. Prescott yelled, Girl, I swear I'll... A second arrow answered faster than he expected, slicing the air close enough for him to jerk back hard. Nari's voice rang clear. Last warning. The canyon crackled with tension. Any spark could set the whole thing ablaze. Mara forced Clover into the chaos. They're trying to turn the herd, she shouted. Cut them off! Cade didn't hesitate. He rode straight at Prescott, using the canyon walls to block any flanking moves. Back off, Cade growled. She's within her rights. Prescott sneered. Not anymore. Blackstone's got the judge in his pocket now. The law rides for him. That law ain't here, Cade shot back, eyes burning. A rider attempted to slip past him toward the calves. Levi Harmon intercepted with a hard swing of his horse, shoulder checking the man into the rock wall. The rider yelped and scrambled to stay mounted. Behind them, the cattle pressed tighter. If they turned, the entire herd could collapse in a deadly crush. Mara rode into the heart of the mess, shouting above the din. Keep them steady. Drive straight, do not let them swing, she cracked her rope against Clover's flank. Dust flew, panic rolled through her animals, but fear was something she understood, something she could fight. Prescott pushed forward his horse, frothing. You're done, Mara. Blackstone'll take every acre. Mara's voice rose stronger than she felt. Not if I get to Cheyenne first. You won't, he spat. Not through this canyon. Mara's pulse hammered, but she didn't break. She lifted her chin. Watch me. Tomas, bleeding from a minor graze where a bullet had skimmed his arm, yelled. Mara, right flank. A cow broke from the herd. Another followed. Panic rippled like water. Mara rode hard, cutting them off, swinging her rope in a fierce arc. Clover responded without hesitation, sliding through dust and rock. They pressed the strays back into formation, just as more shots cracked behind them. Cade shouted Prescott's, trying to force a stampede. Keep the herd moving. Cole. Harmon rode past Mara, grinning like a madman. If they want trouble, they picked the wrong damn canyon. He fired his pistol in the air, the sound bouncing explosively off the walls, startling the cattle forward, but away from Prescott's riders. Stone Bear barked, good, pushed them toward the second run. We're close. Mara didn't know what the second run was, but she trusted him. She had no choice. A sudden burst of gunfire showered shale from the canyon wall above her head. She ducked low over Clover's neck. Cade roared, "Enough." He stood in his stirrups and fired a single warning shot into the air. The echo snapped through the canyon like lightning. The riders faltered. Even Prescott hesitated. Then Stone Bear's voice thundered over everyone else. "Mara, now break the ridge." She saw it, a split in the canyon ahead, wider than the narrow throat they'd just fought through. Sunlight poured into it, hinting at open ground beyond. If they reached that, they would gain room, momentum, safety. "Drive," she screamed, pushing Clover until the mare surged ahead. The herd followed instinctively, sensing escape. The canyon walls widened. The pressure eased. Prescott cursed furiously. "Stop them! They're getting out!" But it was too late. Nari sent another arrow whistling past his stirrup. Levi and Cole boxed in his riders. Stone Bear and Tomas pushed the herd like a living river through the widening gap. Cade rode backward, firing a second warning shot to keep Prescott back. Dust exploded around them. Shouts merged with cattle bellows. Horses reared and scrambled. The canyon rumbled with chaos. Then light. The herd burst through the second ridge into open canyon shoulders bathed in sunlight. Wind swept through the gap, lifting dust into swirling gold. Mara gasped at the sudden spaciousness, dizzying after the suffocating walls. "Keep going, don't stop!" Tomas whooped triumphantly, "We're through!" Behind them, Cade arrived last, backing into the opening, like a shield until the threat receded. Prescott's riders lingered at the choke point, furious, winded, but unwilling to risk another head-on clash in open ground. Prescott snarled, "This ain't over, Redbird." Mara raised her voice so he could hear across the rock and wind. "Then come and take it." Prescott spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. His riders followed him out, fading back into shadow. Breathing hard, trembling heart-hammering, Mara turned to Cade. He looked half-wrecked and half-alive, dust streaking his face, eyes bright with adrenaline. "You held," he said softly. "So did you." "No," Cade said, gaze steady. "I followed. You led." The herd pushed deeper into the wider canyon, slowly calming. The riders gathered, battered but intact. They weren't safe, but they'd made it through the worst choke point on the trail. Cade wiped his brow. "Stone Bear, how far to the canyon's end?" 10 miles, he said. "And danger waits there too." Mara nodded, breath steadying. "Then we ride." Because Blackstone wasn't done, and neither were they. Leadership ain't proven in daylight, Mara. It's proven when the night comes alive and something in the dark decides you don't belong. By the time Mara Redbird and her riders cleared the far end of Bitter Canyon, the sun had clawed its way high above the stone walls, painting the world in harsh, blinding light. The air tasted of dust and old rock. Sweat streaked down the sides of the cattle. Riders slumped in their saddles from exhaustion, adrenaline still smoldering inside them from the fight with Prescott's men. But no one stopped. No one dared. Cade Holt rode ahead to scout the next stretch, while Stone Bear and Naria directed the herd into a narrow valley opening out from the canyon's mouth. The land here looked deceptively peaceful, rolling dry grass, a scattering of boulders, a few scrub pines. But Mara knew better than to trust peace on this trail. Too much had already bled under its surface. Tomas pulled up beside her, wiping blood from the shallow graze on his arm. "We should rest the herd before they collapse." "We can't stop," Mara said. "Not yet." Tomas studied her. "You're shaking." She hadn't realized she was. She tightened her hands on Clover's reins. "I'm fine." He didn't believe her, but he didn't argue. "At least let's get water into them. There's a creek Stone Bear mentioned last night." Mara looked ahead. The valley curved gently eastward, and she could already hear the faint whisper of running water. "Fine," she said. 30 minutes. No more." Tomas nodded and rode off to help Levi and Cole Harmon split the herd into smaller groups to avoid a crush at the creek. Mara watched them work. She watched Stone Bear's calm authority. She watched Nari check the sky and terrain like she could read danger hiding between the blades of grass. These people chose to ride with her, risk for her, fight for her, and she felt the weight of it like a hand pressing the center of her chest. Cade returned as they reached the creek. He slid off his horse, shook dust from his hat, and walked toward her with the easy gait of a man who'd lived on horseback more than on land. "Area's clear," he reported. "No riders, no fresh tracks." "For now," Mara said. "For now," he echoed. The herd spread along the creek, lowering their heads to drink steam rising gently from their backs in the warm midday sun. Riders dismounted to fill canteens, stretch their legs, wash blood from small cuts. Cade crouched beside the creek, splashing water on his face. When he looked up, Mara was still mounted, staring at the slow-moving stream. "You should drink," he said. "I will." "You should rest." "I will." "You're lying," he said casually. She shot him a glare, but he didn't back down. His eyes stayed steady, calm, infuriatingly perceptive. He stood and walked to her. "You held your own in the canyon. Better than most. I almost lost the herd." "You didn't," he replied. "That's the point." She exhaled, slow and shaky. "Prescott won't back off." No, Cade agreed. But he'll rethink riding into a canyon where every shot might bounce back and hit his own men. Out here it's different. Different how Cade glanced toward the hills. Different because now there's space for him to run you down. The words ran cold through her veins. Stone Bear approached them, his expression grim. Tracks ahead. More hoof prints. Not from our herd. Not recent. Mara stiffened. "Blackstone." No, Stone Bear said. "Someone else. More than one group. Riders we don't know." Cade's jaw tightened. Side trails in this country attract all sorts. Could be hunters. Could be bandits. Could be men with no allegiance to anyone. Nari joined them. "The herd will soon be ready to move, but we cannot travel blind." Before Mara could answer, Levi Harmon stumbled toward the group, breathing hard. "You all might want to see this." They followed him to a boulder overlooking the creek. A lone rider's trail cut straight across the valley. Not Blackstone's men, the hoof prints were too light, the pattern too controlled. Tomas crouched to examine them. This horse wasn't running. It was walking. Someone was passing through, slow. "Or scoutin'," Cade murmured. Nari studied the indentations. "Deep on the back left." "That horse is carrying weight," Rider Mara asked. "Or gear. Or weapons." Mara's stomach tightened. Did they see us? Tomas looked up, hard to tell. Cade rose. "If they didn't, they will soon. This valley ain't a secret." Levi kicked a pebble into the creek. "So what do we do?" "Keep moving, set a trap, split the herd." "Splitting," Stone Bear said firmly. "Strength stays with numbers." "We move," Mara decided. "Before we're boxed in." Cade nodded. "I'll take point. Stone Bear and Nari keep the flanks wide. Cole Levi drive the rear." The riders quickly remounted. As they moved on, the valley narrowed into a corridor of grass and rock. The sun dipped lower, setting long shadows across the trail. Mara's nerves prickled. Every rock looked like a person, every shadow like a threat. "Watch the ridges," Stone Bear called. "This is perfect ground for ambush." Nari's bow stayed ready. Tomas kept his hand close to his revolver. Cade scanned ahead, posture taut. Miles passed under hoof. The air grew still. The land grew strange, too quiet, too expectant. Then it came. A sound carried through the valley. Not hooves, not wind. A howl, long, low, echoing across stone. The cattle jerked. Several calves stumbled in fear. The Harmon brothers exchanged looks. Tomas cursed. "Wolves." Stone Bear shook his head. "Not wolves. Coyotes." "Big difference?" Levi asked. "Yes," Stone Bear said. "Coyotes are clever. Coyotes watch. Coyotes test your borders the same way Blackstone does, picking off the weak first." Nari pointed toward the ridge. Eyes. "There." Mara followed her gaze. Two shapes stood against the skyline, lean, long, bone-colored in the fading light. Cade nudged his horse beside Mara. "Stay calm." "I am calm," she lied. "You sound calm," he said, "but your horse knows different." Clover tossed her head nervously. Mara steadied her with a hand on the neck. Stone Bear called, "Keep the herd tight and not let the calves stray." The coyotes didn't descend. They shadowed the ridge above, moving parallel to the herd, with eerie patience. Every few minutes one would stop and stare down with pale eyes. Watching, waiting, studying, as if the world hadn't already thrown them enough danger. Mara's voice was tight. "They follow like they know us." "They know prey," Stone Bear said. "They know opportunity," Nariao added. "And they know fear," Cade murmured. "Leadership ain't proven in daylight, Mara. It's proven when the night comes alive and something in the dark decides you don't belong." Her breath caught. A new sound rose closer this time. More coyotes. A chorus. The herd trembled. The sun sank behind the ridge. Night swallowed the valley. Tomas shouted, "We need fire now," Cade barked. "Push to that hill. There's a plateau, high ground. We camp there." Mara took one last look at the creeping shadows behind and above. Then she raised her voice sharp and strong. "Riders, move the herd up the hill." They surged into motion, hooves pounding against earth as coyotes howled in the dark, the sound growing louder with every step. Night had come, and with it predators both four-legged and two-legged were closing in. Sometimes mercy is a warning, Mara, and sometimes mercy is a mistake. Night clung to the valley like a wet hide stretched tight and unyielding. The coyotes' howls had followed the herd all the way to the plateau, a long sloping rise of rock and hard-packed dirt that gave them elevation but no comfort. The cattle circled uneasily inside the crude ring the riders had formed with their bedrolls, saddlebags, and lantern stakes. Firelight licked across nervous eyes and twitching hides. Mara Redbird stood beside the flames, gripping the edge of her coat tight around her. The cold wasn't the kind that wind brought, it was the kind that came from being hunted. The kind that seeped into bone when danger hovered too close to name. Tomas fed the fire another log. "They're testing us," he muttered. "Circle and circle. Keep the herd shaken, and sooner or later one calf breaks. Then the rest panic." Mara Nari said quietly, "Look." Two coyotes stood at the edge of the fire's reach, silhouettes sharp against the low darkness. Their eyes gleamed pale and intelligent. They did not lunge. They did not retreat. They waited. Stone Bear approached, blanket draped over one shoulder. They smell exhaustion, fear, opportunity. He clicked his tongue softly. Coyotes do not attack head-on. They wait for the moment between moments. Mara's thoughts flickered to Bitter Canyon, to Prescott, to Blackstone's looming shadow. It feels the same, she murmured, like someone watching from the dark, waiting for me to slip. Cade Holt, who had been silent since dusk, finally stepped into the circle of firelight. His face was unreadable, carved hard by the long ride, the near stampede, the rock slide, the canyon fight. Dust streaked his jaw. A thin cut marked one cheek. He didn't aim a gun at the coyotes, didn't reach for his knife. He simply watched them. They know we've had a long day, he said. They know the herd's tired. They know we'll make mistakes. His voice was calm, but something under it vibrated, something protective, maybe angry, maybe both. They're smart, Mara said. Smart enough to stay alive, Cade replied. Sometimes smarter than people. The coyotes moved along the ridge, 2 becoming 3, then 4 shadows, multiplying, with the slow patience of predators used to winning. Do we shoot? Levi Harmon asked, hand already on his pistol. Stone Bear shook his head. A gunshot brings echoes. Echoes carry far in the night. Blackstone far? Cole Harmon asked, eyes narrowing. Far enough, Cade said, and we're too close to the open plain. Sound'll travel. Cole lowered his pistol with a disappointed grunt. Always wanted to scare off a pack. Fear doesn't scare fear, Nari-I murmured. The wind shifted. The cattle stirred, hooves clattering on stone. Mara heard the calves bleating softly, clustered at the center, like heartbeats gathered together. Cade glanced at her. You command tonight. She blinked. What Tomas frowned. Cade she doesn't need. Cade cut in simply. She does. He turned to Mara, eyes steady. This is your trail, your herd, your riders. You decide how we handle threat and fear. Mara's pulse beat hard beneath her ribs. She wasn't used to voices waiting for her decisions. She wasn't used to danger bending around her words. But everyone watched. Even the coyotes seemed to be waiting for her voice. She inhaled, breath trembling but full. We don't shoot, she said. Cole threw up his hands. Great. Coyotes get a free buffet. Mara glared at him. Shooting risks, the herd risks, alerting Blackstone risks, trapping us here. We need silence, control, not noise. Stone Bear's lips twitched in approval. Nari-I nodded once. Good. But Cade didn't nod. He stared hard at the ridge where the coyotes prowled. What's wrong? Mara asked. He didn't look away. One of those shadows is too big. The air went still. Stone Bear stepped forward slowly. Show me. Cade pointed. 3 coyotes slinked along the ridge tails, low bodies lean. But the 4th, it was broader, heavier, moving with a purpose that didn't match the pack. Not coyote, Stone Bear said. Not wolf either. Tomas's breath caught. Person maybe, Cade answered. Or maybe someone from the other side, trails Stone Bear mentioned. Those tracks we saw today. Nari-I's voice sharpened. Someone scouting us or waiting to see if we're weak, Stone Bear said. Or planning something for dawn. Mara's heart thudded painfully. The Harmon brothers fell instantly quiet. Even the cattle stilled as if listening. Mara whispered, What do we do? Hod stepped close enough. that their shoulders nearly brushed. "We do what predators don't expect," he said. "We hold our ground." Mara swallowed. "And in the morning?" "In the morning," Cade said, "we find out who's following us." They camped in a tight formation, fires dimmed low weapons close at hand. The riders took shifts, Stone Bear first, Naria second, Tomas third. Cade refused a bedroll and instead paced the perimeter silently, boots crunching soft against the grit. Mara wanted to tell him to rest, to sit, to breathe, but she held back. Leadership didn't mean hovering. Leadership meant trusting the people who guarded her. So she lay beneath her blanket, Clover hobbled nearby the cattle, shifting quietly in the cold. Sleep came slowly, and when it came restless. A sound snapped Mara awake. Not a howl, not hooves, not wind. Breathing. Human breathing. She sat up fast, her hand reaching instinctively for the small blade Tomas had insisted she keep. Cade crouched next to her, his hand gently touching her shoulder before she could lash out. "It's all right," he whispered. "Dawn's close." She forced her heart to slow. "What happened? Coyotes left," he said. But the shadow didn't. Mara's breath tightened. Still out there, still watching. She stood blanket falling to her boots. The air was icy dawn purple spreading across the sky. The riders roused one by one, stretching sore muscles, rubbing sleep from eyes. Stone Bear walked over, face unreadable. "I saw the figure just before sunrise. A rider. Alone." Blackstone Thomas asked. No, Stone Bear said. "Smaller. Lighter. Moves differently." Nari joined them. "Tracks lead toward the east ridge." "That's our direction," Mara whispered. "All the more reason to move soon," Stone Bear said. Mara nodded, but Cade shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "We don't run from shadows. Not without knowing what they want." Mara looked at him. "You want to go after them, I want to know who's trailing your herd," Cade corrected. "If it's danger, we face it now. If it ain't, then maybe it's something else." Like what Tomas asked, doubtful. Cade shrugged once. Trail ghosts come in all shapes. Mara felt every eye settle on her again. Another decision. Another moment where her voice was the hinge everything swung on. She thought of the valley, the canyon, Prescott, Blackstone's looming fury, the coyotes, the rider watching them from the ridge. Fear pressed cold fingers around her throat. But another voice echoed louder. "Leadership ain't proven in daylight, Mara." She met each rider's gaze. Then she said, steady as she could, "We follow the tracks." Cade nodded once, approval without a smile. Stone Bear tightened his saddle strap. Nari pulled her bowstring taut. Tomas muttered, "Guess we're chasing ghosts before breakfast." The Harmon brothers grinned like they'd been waiting for this all night. Mara mounted Clover, heart hammering. Sometimes the one you fear in the shadows is the one sent to save you, or the one meant to break you. The morning light slid low across the eastern ridge as Mara Redbird and her riders followed the tracks left in the dust. The print's small, precise, deliberate cut a clean path up the slope. A lone rider had shadowed them through the night. Whether friend or enemy, they couldn't guess. Clover's breath steamed in the crisp dawn air as Mara guided her up the incline. Behind her, Stone Bear rode silent as the ridge itself, Nari, scanning every rise and ravine, Tomas on edge with a hand close to his revolver. The Harmon brothers trailed not far behind their usual grins, replaced with a tension Mara rarely saw. But it was Cade Holt who rode closest, his horse in step with hers. He said nothing at first. His silence was never empty. It was the kind that carried weight. Mara watched the faint tracks wind ahead. "You said we'd face whoever this is," she murmured. "What if they're leading us into something?" Cade didn't look at her. "Then we ride in smart. Quiet. Ready," she swallowed. "And if it's Blackstone?" "Then he learned how to ride light overnight," Cade said. "These tracks don't belong to him." Stone Bear signaled from the front. "We crest here." The riders slowed as they reached the top of the ridge. The valley beyond unfurled into a wide basin of scrub grass, broken boulders, and distant trees. The early light painted everything in pale gold. But it wasn't the valley that held their eyes. It was the figure standing at its center. A lone rider on a dun-colored horse, motionless, waiting. Mara's heart lurched. She couldn't see their face, only the lean silhouette outlined by the rising sun. Nari whispered, "That is no bandit, no scout." Stone Bear nodded slowly. "Someone who knows they are outnumbered, yet waits." Cade exhaled once long and controlled. "Then we approach slow." They descended the ridge in a careful line, weapons holstered but hands ready. The dun horse twitched an ear as they came closer, but the rider didn't move. Not forward, not back. When they were 30 yards away, Cade raised a hand and halted the riders. "I go first." Mara's breath tightened. "I should go." His eyes flicked to her. Sharp, protective. "Not until I know who we're dealing with." Her voice dropped. "Cade." But he was already nudging his horse forward. The dun rider finally shifted, lifting their chin. The sun broke free of a cloud at that exact moment, lighting their face, and Mara gasped. A woman, young, dusty, wild-eyed. Her hair was braided in the Arapaho-style, tight, practical, streaked with wind-blown grit. She wore a worn jacket pinned with a beadwork emblem of the running horse symbol of the old trading lines that once crossed this land. Stone Bear inhaled sharply behind Mara. "I know that mark." Cade didn't slow. "Who are you?" he called. The woman lifted both hands slowly and revealed she was unarmed. "My name is Lyra Lonehill," she called back. "I've been trying to reach your camp since last night." Cade pulled up 10 feet from her. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because you're being hunted by more than Blackstone." Silence rolled across the valley like a cold wind. Mara forced Clover forward. "Explain." Lyra looked straight at her eyes, fierce, haunted, determined. 2 days ago, I saw men riding in the West Pass. They weren't Blackstones. They weren't valley folk. They carried rifles and packs. They moved fast like they were tracking someone. Thomas stiffened. "Tracking who you heard," Lyra said. "Your trail." Mara felt the chill run straight through her bones. Cade's jaw flexed. "How do you know they were after us?" "Because I overheard them at their camp," Lyra answered. "They said they were hired to intercept a woman driving cattle out of the valley. They said the boss wanted her alive or broken." Mara's throat tightened. "Blackstone." "No," Lyra said. "Not Blackstone. A man named Rourke." Stone Bear frowned deeply. "Rourke. A mercenary. Hired gun. Works outside the law." Nari nodded. "I've heard of him. Men like him fight only for coin." Mara shook her head. "Why would someone like that come after me? Because someone paid him to," Lyra said. "And he's not alone. He's got 7 men with him, all armed, all mean." Cade cursed under his breath. Blackstone must have hired him after Prescott failed. Lyra shook her head quickly. Blackstone has nothing to do with these men. They spoke of him like he's a simple nuisance. A strange, cold dread curled in Mara's stomach. Then who? But Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she leaned forward urgently. They're only a few hours behind you. They're following your trail through Bitter Canyon. They didn't get caught in the rock slide. They're still coming. The wind shifted. The air grew tight. Stonebear looked at Cade. We cannot fight two enemies. Not here. Not tired. Nari pointed toward the rising basin. There is forest ahead. We could hide the herd. Levi scoffed. Hide 300 cattle. How Cole elbowed him. Quiet. Let the smart people talk. Tomas paced restless. If Rourke's men reach us before we find cover, they'll take the herd. Cade finished. And Mara. Lyra nodded grimly. They said their pay depends on it. Mara's pulse crashed in her ears. This wasn't just Blackstone. This wasn't just a fight over land. Someone else wanted her stopped. Someone willing to hire killers. Someone who didn't care if people died in the process. She steadied herself in the saddle. Why are you helping us? Lyra's gaze softened with something like old pain. Because years ago, your father helped my family. He gave us water when we had none, fed us when we were starving. He didn't have to, but he did. Mara felt her breath crack in her chest. Lyra continued. I owed him. Now I owe you. Cade studied her closely. You're telling us the truth. Lyra's jaw trembled. If you stay here any longer, you'll die. Rourke doesn't take prisoners. Not whole. A sharp, cold silence followed. Then Cade turned to Mara. This changes everything. We need a new plan. Stonebear agreed. There's forest north of here. Dense, twisted pine. Hard for riders to navigate. Nari said good ground to disappear a herd if we're quiet. Tomas frowned. But the cattle, we can muffle them, Stonebear interrupted. Move at dusk, hide by night. Levi rubbed his hands together. I love a good hideout. Cole grinned. Especially one that makes killers mad. Mara looked at Lyra. Will you ride with us? Lyra nodded without hesitation. I'll show you the safest trail. Cade stepped closer to Mara. You said you wanted to choose your fate, he murmured. This is the moment. You either lead us into that forest, or you let them catch us in the open. Mara felt her heartbeat slow, then steady. She didn't flinch. We go north, she said. Into the forest. Cade nodded once. Then we ride hard. Lyra kicked her horse forward. I'll take point. Stonebear and Naria rode to the flanks. Tomas signaled the Harmon brothers to gather the herd. Mara gripped Clover's reins tighter. Cade touched her shoulder briefly, steadying her, grounding her. Sometimes the one you fear in the shadows is the one sent to save you, he said quietly. Or the one meant to break you. She swallowed. I guess we find out which soon. Soon enough, Cade replied. The herd began to move, and the forest waited like a mouth ready to close around them. If you run blind, you die blind. But if you face what hunts you even wounded, you live on your own terms. The northern forest rose before them, like a dark wave, a wall of twisted pines and thick underbrush that swallowed sunlight whole. To Mara Redbird, it looked less like a refuge and more like a place where the world forgot people existed, a place where sound disappeared, a place where danger could hide in every shadow. But they had no choice. Lyra Lonehill guided her dun horse to the forest's edge and pointed to a narrow break between two ancient trunks. There. That's where the old trader's trail begins. Cade Holt's horse sidled closer to Mara. "You ready? No," she said honestly. "But I'm going anyway." "Good," he murmured. "That's what courage is." Behind them, the herd restless shuffled snorting clouds into the cold morning air. The riders were already feeling the weight of what came next, Wark and his men closing in from the canyon trail. Behind them, coyotes tracking for weakness, and Blackstone's anger simmering somewhere far back in the valley. One enemy alone would have been enough. 3 was survival on a blade's edge. Stone Bear rode up front and lifted his hand. "We move." Slow at first, then faster. "The ground in here is uneven. Do not lose your footing." Nari slipped into the trees on the right flank without a sound, already a shadow among the shadows. Tomas tightened the cinches of his saddle jaw, clenched with unspoken worry. Levi and Cole Harmon exchanged a look, half excitement, half dread. The herd moved reluctantly, hooves crunching pine needles and snapping twigs. Mara urged Clover forward, and the mare obeyed, ears flicking nervously at the raw silence. The forest swallowed them whole. Inside the woods, the world changed. The air felt heavier, cooler, still. Branches tangled overhead like bony fingers blotting out half the morning light. The ground dipped unexpectedly, rose sharply, narrowed to single-lane passes where riders had to turn sideways or duck low. Dust didn't rise, it settled, clinging to skin like damp ash. The herd didn't like it. Calves cried out uneasy. Cows bumped and shouldered each other, searching for space that didn't exist. Mara rode near the front eyes, adjusting to the dimness. "It's too tight. We'll lose control if one bolts." Lyra nodded. "We keep them calm with noise. Soft noise. Singing helps." Cole perked up. "Singing like actual singing." Stone Bear answered with a low rumble, a deep rhythmic chant that echoed strangely in the trees. Naria joined in with a soft harmony. The cattle settled almost immediately. Levi gawked. "Well, I'll be damned. Music cows respect." "They respect calm," Stone Bear corrected. "They respect confidence," Cade added. Mara swallowed. She was trying to hold both. The trail wound deeper. The trees thickened. And somewhere behind them, the hunters closed in. Cade kept checking the rear. "If Rourke's men reach the forest edge, we'll hear them. They'll need to slow down before entering." "Unless they're stupid," Tomas muttered. "They're paid well," Cade replied. "Stupid doesn't last long in their line of work." Branches snapped to the left. Mara stiffened, but Nari signaled from the shadows, "Coyote." Not Rourke. Not yet. For nearly 2 hours, they pushed deeper into the trees. Sweat dampened Mara's shirt. Her hands ached from gripping the reins. Every crack of a branch made her heart jump. Every shadow looked like a rifle barrel. But it wasn't until the trail funneled into a narrow ravine, steep banks on both sides, that Cade pulled up sharply. He raised a fist. The riders halted. Mara's stomach twisted. "What is it?" Cade didn't answer. Stone Bear slid from his horse and knelt near the ravine floor. He brushed away leaves. Mara dismounted and knelt beside him. What she saw made her breath catch. Tracks. Human. Fresh. Multiple pairs. Coming from the north and stopping right at the ravine. but no prints leaving. Tomas hissed. They were here. Recently. Cade crouched beside the prince, face darkening. They knew we'd come this way. Nari emerged from the shadows behind them. They're not Rourke's men. Their prints are lighter, smaller. Mara forced air into her lungs. More scouts! Not scouts, Lyra said quietly. Locals, old hunters. The Lone Hill Band used this forest before my time. Stone Bear nodded grimly. People skilled in silence. People who could watch a herd pass 5 feet from them without making a sound, Cade said. Mara's voice dropped. Are they dangerous? Anyone can be dangerous, Stone Bear said. But they are not enemies, not unless we force their hand. Lyra glanced toward the thick brush above. They watched us, but they didn't approach. That means they're waiting. Waiting for what Levi asked. Waiting to see what we Arcade said. Threat, or trespassers, or something worse. Mara swallowed. Or something worth helping. Cole scratched his head. Think they like us. Cade shot him a flat look. If they liked us, they wouldn't be hiding. Lyra leaned down to the track's edge. They know someone dangerous is behind you. They know the forest will be cut with blood if Rourke finds you here. Mara felt a tightness coil in her chest. So what do? Cade stood slowly. We keep moving. But we do it careful. They're watching for intent. If we mean no harm, they'll let us pass. And if they don't, Tomas asked. Cade's jaw clenched. Then we face them before we face Rourke, and we pray they're the lesser fight. A heavy silence settled. The forest seemed to listen. Then Mara rose, brushing dirt off her knees. Her hands shook, but she refused to hide it. She forced her shoulders straight, just as her father taught her. We keep moving, she said. But we do it with respect. No guns drawn. No threats. We ride like guests. Stone Bear nodded approval, glinting in his eyes. Nari murmured something in Arapaho, quiet, reverent. Cade studied Mara with a look she couldn't name. Not admiration. Not pride. Something more serious. You're learning, he said. I don't have time not to, she answered. Lyra pointed north. The old trade path splits ahead. If we take the left fork, it leads to a hidden hollow big enough to bed the herd for the night. That's where we go, Mara said. Tomas exhaled with relief. Rest'll help. We're running on nerves. But Cade didn't relax. He stared into the woods behind them, toward Bitter Canyon, toward Rourke. Rest won't stop what's coming, he said quietly. They're on our trail, and tomorrow, they'll catch up. Mara felt her pulse throb in her throat. Then tomorrow we stand. Cade shook his head. No. Tomorrow you choose. Stand. Run. Or make your own way through hell. He swung onto his horse and motioned the herd forward. And as they moved into the dark forest, Mara Redbird understood something with brutal clarity. The showdown was coming. The hunters were closing in, and the forest's dense, silent watching would decide who walked out alive when the reckoning arrived at dawn.